Once upon a time, when pigs were swine, there was a king and a queen, and they had one son, little Billy. But the queen was very ill. Before she died, she gave her son Billy a bull, and she told Billy never to be parted from that bull. And she put it on the king as a last request that he should never allow Billy to be parted from his bull. And the king promised, and the queen died. But then, after a time, the king remarried. But the woman he married did not take to little Billy Beg, and she did not take to that bull either, seeing how thick Billy and the bull were, and she began to determine how she could get Billy and his bull parted. And in cases like this, the person she went to for advice was an old henwife. "Well, you just do as I say," said the henwife, "and I'll sure part them soon enough." "All right," said the queen, "what is it I must do?" "Take to your bed," said the henwife. "Say you're very ill, and that nothing can cure you, and then call for me." And that's just what the wicked old woman did. She took to her bed, and she said she was ailing, and the doctors all came, and they examined her. They couldn't find anything wrong with her, but still she didn't get better. Finally, she told the king to send the henwife to her. The henwife pretended to look her over and said, "There's only one thing that will cure the queen." "And what's that?" said the king. "Whatever it is, I'll get it." "3 mouthfuls of the blood of Billy Beg's bull," said the henwife. Ah, but then the king wouldn't hear about that. He remembered his promise. "All right then," said the henwife, "but she'll just get worse and worse till she gets her way." The next day the queen was worse, or pretended to be. And the next day the queen said she was dying, and would the king have her death on his head, just for an old bull? Well, no, the king couldn't do that, and so he ordered that Billy Beg's bull should be killed. Poor Billy Beg, when he heard that, how downhearted he was. He went dothering about. The bull saw him, and asked him what was wrong. Billy told him he was to be killed, and the queen to drink 3 mouthfuls of his blood. "Huh," said the bull, "the queen will never taste a drop of my blood. You shall see." The next day, when the bull was to be killed, the queen got up out of her deathbed and came down to have the delight of seeing the death. But when the bull was led up to be killed, he says to Billy, "Jump up on my back. Let's see what kind of a horseman you are." Billy was ready, and he jumped up on the bull's back, grabbed onto his horns, and that bull jumped 9 miles high, 9 miles deep, 9 miles broad, and came right down on top of the queen. Billy sticking between his horns. Hundreds were looking on, dazed at the sight. And the bull rushed right through the crowd. And the queen herself was dead. They couldn't go back. But where he galloped, you wouldn't know day by night, or night by day, over high hills, low hills, sheep walks, and bullock traces, the Cove o' Cork, and old Tom Fox with his bugle horn. And when at last they stopped, the bull said to Billy, "Now then, you and me, Billy, we have a trial ahead of us. Reach into my left ear and pull out the little napkin you find there." So Billy reached into the bull's left ear, and he pulled out a little napkin. "Unroll it," said the bull. Billy unrolled it, and it spread itself with all kinds of good things to eat. And Billy had a fine supper, and when he was done, he just rolled everything up in the napkin and put it back in the bull's left ear. "Now," said the bull, "reach into my right ear, Billy. Pull out what you find there." And into the right ear of the bull, Billy stuck his hand and pulled out a little bit of a stick. "It looks like a stick," said the bull, "but you wind it over your head 3 times, and it'll turn into a sword and give you the strength of 1,000 men, plus your own. And when you have no need of it as a sword, it can turn back into a stick again." Billy tried it out. Sure enough, he felt as strong as 1,000 men when he wielded that little sword, that little stick over his head that turned into a sword. And then he put it back in the bull's ear. "Now, Billy, we must be off," said the bull. And they went where you wouldn't know day by night or night by day, over high hills, low hills, sheep walks, and bullock traces, the Cove o' Cork, and old Tom Fox and his bugle horn. And there they met another bull. And Billy's bull and this other bull had a terrible fight. Oh, such a fight was never seen before or since, for they knocked the soft ground into hard, and the hard into soft, and the soft into spring wells, and the spring wells into rocks, and the rocks into high hills, and then they broke the high hills down, and they fought long and hard. But finally, Billy Beg's bull killed the other and drank his blood. Then Billy took the napkin out of the bull's ear again, spread it out, and had a good dinner. But the bull said, "Now, Billy, tomorrow noon, I'm going to have to fight the brother of this bull, and I don't know whether he'll win or not, for he's much stronger than this one was. But we'll have to see." So the next day, they went on their travels, and they went where you wouldn't know night by day or day by night, over high hills, low hills, sheepwalks and bullock traces, the Cove of Cork, and old Tom Fox with his bugle horn. And there they met the bull's brother that he had killed the day before, and they had the most terrible fight. You haven't seen the like since. They knocked the soft ground into hard, and they knocked the hard into soft, and they knocked the soft ground into spring wells, and the spring wells into rocks, and the rocks into high hills, and then they fought down those high hills. They fought long and hard. And Billy Beg's bull killed that other bull and drank his blood. Then Billy took out the napkin, and he had spread it out and ate another hearty dinner, and then the bull said to him, "All right, Billy, now I have to tell you. Tomorrow noon again, I have to fight the brother of these two bulls I've just killed, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be too much for me. Well, now, when I'm dead, you take the napkin and the little stick out of my ear, and you go out to meet your fortune. But before you go, cut a strip of hide from my belly and another one from my back, make it into a belt and tie it around you, and while you're wearing that belt, Billy, you'll never be able to be killed." Well, Billy didn't want to hear what the bull was saying, but there was nothing for it. He climbed back up onto the bull's back, and then they started off and away where you wouldn't know day by night or night by day, over high hills, low hills, sheepwalks and bullock traces, the Cove of Cork, and old Tom Fox with his bugle horn. And sure enough, 12 o'clock the next day, out came the big brother of the two bulls that Billy Beg's bull had killed, and he was called the Black Bull of the Forest. He was too much for Billy Beg's bull. They had a terrible fight, and Billy Beg's bull fought long and hard, and such a fight was never seen before or since, for they knocked the soft ground into hard, and the hard into soft, and the soft into spring wells, and the spring wells into rocks, and the rocks into high hills, and they fought down those high hills. But at the end of it, the Black Bull of the Forest killed Billy Beg's bull and drank his blood. Then Billy Beg was sorrowful. He sat down beside his poor dead bull, and he cried his eyes out for 2 days and 2 nights. And then, when he had no more tears left in him, he did what the bull told him. He cut a strip of hide from his back and another from his belly, and he made a belt out of it and put it round him, and then he pulled the napkin out of the bull's ear, and he spread it out, and he had a good supper. For it was hungry he was after all his fasting. And then he took that little stick out of the other ear and put it in his belt, and off he went to push his fortune. Well, finally, he traveled on, and he came to a gentleman's place and asked the gentleman if he could get employment there, and the gentleman said yes, he was looking for a boy who would take the cattle out. "What wages will you pay?" said Billy. Well, the gentleman said, "I've only 3 horses, 3 goats, 3 cows, and 3 asses to be led into the orchard, but there's no use talking about wages until you come back, for you see, any other boy I've always hired to do this job has gone into the orchard and has never come back from the orchard. And so we'll talk about wages if you come back." "I see," said Billy. "All right, then." It was agreed upon, and the next morning he got up and he drove out the 3 goats, the 3 cows, the 3 horses, the 3 asses into the orchard. And he sat around while they began to eat the grass. But in the middle of the day, Billy heard a terrible roaring that shook the apples right off the trees. It shook the horns right off the cows practically, and it made the hair on Billy's head stand straight up. And before he knew it, the most frightful big giant came out of the forest and looked at Billy with his hands on his hips and his legs spread out and said, "Ha! You're too big for one bite and too small for two. What will I do with you?" Billy looked the giant right in the eye and said, "I'll fight you." "Ha!" said the giant, laughing at Billy's little size. "Well then, what'll it be? Shall we have a wrestle or a sword fight? Or what?" "Let's have a wrestle," said Billy. Of course, Billy pulled out his little stick, wound it around his head 3 times, and it turned into a sword that gave him the strength of 1,000 men plus his own. He put the sword down, and he and the giant began to grapple. They each got a hold. But Billy lifted that giant right off the ground and then sunk him down into the ground up to his armpits. "Oh, have mercy!" yelled the giant. But Billy took up his sword and whacked off that giant's head. And in the evening, Billy drove the 3 goats, the 3 cows, the 3 horses, and the 3 asses back to the gentleman's place. And the milk they got out of those animals, why, it filled every vessel in the house. And the gentleman came out and said, "Why, this beats all. I never saw anyone come back alive out of that orchard before, and the cows have never given a drop of milk." "Did you see anything in the orchard?" said the man to Billy. "Oh, nothing worse than myself," says Billy. "Well, that's strange," said the man. Well, the next morning, they all got up, and the man came out to Billy and he said, "You know, another strange thing has happened. I used to hear the cries of 3 giants in the night. Last night I only heard 2. Do you know anything about that?" "Well, I can't say as I know too much about that," said Billy. "What about my wages?" "Well, you came out of the orchard once, it's true," said the man, "but I don't think you could come out twice. Let's see what happens today." "All right," says Billy. So he drove the animals into the orchard, and by midday, what do you think? He heard the most frightful roaring, and into his presence comes a 2-headed giant. The giant looks at Billy and he says, "You're too big for 1 bite and too little for 2. What'll I do with you?" "I'll fight you," said Billy. "Ha ha," said the giant. "What'll it be? Swing by the back, a cut of the sword, or a square round of boxing?" "Oh, let's wrestle," said Billy. But of course, first, you know, he took out his little stick and turned it into a sword and got the strength of 1,000 men. And then he did the same thing with that giant as he had done with his brother. He picked him right off the ground, shoved him right into the ground up to his armpits, and when the giant yelled, "Mercy, let me go," Billy picked up his sword and cut off those 2 heads. And that was the end of that giant. And when the animals got back that night, there was so much milk in them, they filled every vessel in the house, and it ran out of the house and turned an old rusty mill that hadn't been turned for 30 years. And the master, if he was surprised before, he was 10 times more surprised now. He said, "Are you sure you didn't see anything in the orchard, Billy?" "Nothing worse than myself," said Billy. And Billy looked so small. "All right," said the man. Well, let's see what happens tomorrow." Morning came, and the man said to Billy, "You know, it is a strange thing. I used to hear those 3 giants moaning every night. I only heard 1 last night. Do you know anything about that, Billy?" "No, I can't say as I know too much about that," said Billy. "And what about my wages?" "Well, now, let's just see if you come back today," said the man, "and then we'll talk about wages." "All right," says Billy, "whatever you say." So, as he had done 2 days before, Billy took the animals into the orchard, and he, in the middle of the day, met the 2 giants' big brother who had 6 heads. And as it happened before, Billy got the strength of 1,000 men, and he took care of that giant too. And when he got back, there was so much milk in those cows that it had to be turned into a valley, and it made a lake 3 miles long and 3 miles broad, 3 miles deep, and it has been filled with salmon and white trout ever since, and you can go there and see, if you don't believe me. The gentleman wondered more than ever about Billy, but he didn't say anything except he said that for wages, Billy could have just about anything he wanted if he stayed there. "Oh, agreed," said Billy. "But," said the man, "I hope you'll stay at least 1 more day, because I'm going to see the fight, and you'll have to stay around and watch the animals." "Fight? What fight?" "Oh, you haven't heard about it? It's the king's daughter's going to be devoured by a fiery dragon with 12 heads, and the greatest fighter in the land has been fed specially for the last 3 months, and he's going to be there to try to kill the dragon. And if he's able to kill that dragon, the king's going to give him the princess in marriage." "Oh, that will be fine," said Billy. So Billy drove out the 3 goats, the 3 cows, the 3 horses, and the 3 asses to the orchard again that day, while his master went off to see the fight. And the like of all that passed that day to see the fight, why, has never been witnessed before. They went in coaches and carriages, on horses and jackasses, riding and walking and crawling and creeping. And they said to Billy as they passed, "Ha, little man, aren't you going to see the fight?" "No, I don't think so," said Billy. But when Billy found them all gone, he went back, and he saddled and bridled the best black horse his master owned, put on his best suit of clothes, and he went riding out behind all the rest. And when he got there, he took a look at the king's daughter. Oh, she was so beautiful. And then he saw the great warrior that was to fight the dragon. He was walking up and down on the lawn before the princess in his suit of armor, and he had 3 men behind him carrying a great big sword. Everyone was looking at him. But then all of a sudden, the fiery dragon came out of the sky. 12 heads, each mouth spitting fire, 12 roars. And the warrior ran away and jumped into the well and hid himself up to the neck in water. Nobody could get him to come out again and face the dragon. Oh, the princess wrung her hands. She didn't know what to do. And then the king yelled out, "Isn't there anyone here to save my daughter from the dragon? I'll give her to him in marriage." No one stirred, except little Billy. He tied that belt, that bull's hide belt, around him. Then he took out a little stick and he wielded it around his head when nobody was looking, and it turned into a sword. And when that fiery dragon landed on the lawn to devour the princess, he was there in front of her. And he jumped up and he cut off every one of those 12 heads. And then, when he had done that, everyone came rushing up to see who he was and how he had done it. But he didn't want them to know, and he jumped back up on his black horse. The princess got to him first, and she tried to hold on to him and pull him down, but all she could reach was his foot, and his shoe came off in her hand. And Billy ran away on that black horse. And then the warrior came out of the well, and he said it was he who had cut off the dragon's heads. He was doing it in disguise. It was just his way of fighting, and he claimed the king's daughter. She tried the shoe on him, though, and said it didn't fit. He wasn't the one who had done it, and she wouldn't marry anyone but the one who had killed the dragon. Well, when Billy got home, he changed his clothes again and had the horse in the stable and the cattle all in before his master came in, and his master was talking and talking about what had happened that day. And Billy said, "Oh, it was very interesting." "And," said the gentleman, "tomorrow everyone's coming back to the castle, and the princess is going to try the shoe on everyone, and the one it fits is going to be her husband. What do you think of that now, Billy?" "Ah, that was wonderful indeed," said Billy, "very wonderful entirely." After that, all the people in the country came to the king's castle, and you just haven't seen the like of that before since, for they went in coaches and carriages, on horses and jackasses, riding and walking and crawling and creeping, and little Billy, in rags and tatters, was the last to come up. Everyone was trying on that shoe. Some of them were cutting off their heels and cutting off their toes to see if they could fit into it. What a commotion there was. It was all no use. The shoe could not be got to fit any of them at all, and the king's daughter was going to give up in despair, when ragged old Billy elbowed his way through and said, "Let me try it on. Maybe it'll fit me." But the people, when they saw him in rags and tatters, all began to laugh at him and say, "Oh, go along with you, you example, you." And they shoved and they pushed him back, but the king's daughter said, "No, everyone should try it on." And so Billy went up, and all the people looked on, breaking their hearts, laughing at the conceit of it. But what would you have? To the dumbfounding of them all, the shoe fitted Billy as nice as if it was made on his foot for a last. So the king's daughter claimed Billy for her husband, and then he did confess it was he who had killed the dragon. And when the king had him all dressed up in silk and satin with plenty of gold and silver, everyone said he looked like a prince. Of course he was. You know that as well as I do. He was married to the king's daughter, and the wedding lasted 9 days, 9 hours, 9 minutes, 9 half minutes, and 9 quarter minutes. And they lived happy and well from that day to this.